Hey everybody, this is going to be a video specifically about short rows concerning, get back over there, concerning the Front Range Shawl. You can see right here in this second section is called Stream. You can see some short rows. That's where the work isn't worked, the row isn't worked completely to the end of the row. You turn around and then work back again. So in this case you can see alternating stripes of color, and that helps you see this. And then these are stopped at intervals between, so I think it's like 6 stitches between, so you work 6 stitches before you stopped the last time, with the orange in this case, and then go back. And then again with the yellow, you stop 6 stitches before you stopped with the orange again, and then go back, and so on and so forth, until you've got all of these amazingly beautiful stripes with alternating color and texture. In this case, you can see a pearl ridge for each of the yellow stripes. So let's get on to showing you how to work up some different short rows. So the first short row method that I'll show you is the wrap and turn method. This is the most traditional. I don't know why I'm picking up the gray yarn. I don't need it yet, or at all, I suppose. So the wrap and turn is the most traditional short row method. And I'm knitting continental style. But I will show you how to do it as well in English style or throwing. Your pattern tells you to knit to a specific spot and then do a wrap and turn. So then what you do is you slip the next stitch purlwise, bring your yarn in front, slip the stitch back, and then turn your work. And then your yarn goes wherever you are going next. If you're purling, it goes in the back, and you continue to purl to finish your row. If you're knitting, it goes in front, or in back rather. Did I say front with the purling? I meant front with purling, and then back with knitting. In this case, I'm going to knit back, and let's show you how to do that English style. So here's the point that we would work to before we wrap and turn. So I slip it purlwise, I bring the yarn in front, I slip the stitch back, and then I turn the work. And then, like I said, at this point you'll decide whether you're knitting or purling again. In this case I'm knitting, so I'll knit back to the beginning of the row. So I knit, finish the row, and then I put a row of gray in between so that I can show you what it looks like if you don't pick up the wrap, and see, so you can see how that looks. Because I think in a couple of these you're not really going to be able to tell in the shawl if you do it a little differently and don't pick up the wrap. In this case, the next one I'm going to show you to do is the Japanese short row, and I've also put a stitch marker in here so that you can see another technique that I use to help me to remember when I should do my next short row. So I'll knit up to this marker, take the marker off, and then in a Japanese short row it's done a little differently. So you won't involve that next stitch, but as long as you continue to do the right amount of stitches in between, you won't have to worry about a weird count between. So in a Japanese short row you continue by just turning your work. So you knit to the point where it tells you to turn, and then you turn, and at this point I'm going to take one of these locking stitch markers or a clippy marker and put it on the working yarn. I'll snug it up against that stitch, keeping it on the back side of the work, and then I'm going to knit back. So in essence you just knit back, and with this clip marker here, this acts in picking up your wrap, or what would be your wrap. So at this point I'm going to work however many stitches I need to work, and then put my marker back on at the interval. So if it's 4 stitches between each short row, I would count that first as my first stitch. 2, 3, 4, place my stitch marker back on, and then when I return, as you'll see in the next video, that'll tell me that that's where my short row needs to be, and then I stop at that point, remove it, and then put it back on after I work my next interval of stitches. And again, I've worked, completed the row, and then I've worked another row of the light colored yarn so that you can see the differences here. The next one is my preferred type of short row, and this is a German short row. It doesn't have anything to pick up, and I'll show you why. So I'm knitting to my marker because I've placed that in at the interval, and I'm going to say the interval is 4 so that I can kind of show you how this works again. So 2 things at once to learn right here. When you knit to the point that you need to knit, you simply turn your work, slip the next stitch. So you do need to have the stitch, the yarn on the back side of the work or wherever the yarn is. So if you're purling, you would have it wherever it ends up. In this case, I just knit so the yarn is on the back side here, and I'll do this both ways so that you can see how it works. I slip the stitch back, so this is the yarn, the stitch that I just worked. I slip the stitch onto the needle, and then I pull that yarn back over the working needle, and you can see that it turns this single stitch from below into 2 stitches. And this is important to remember. I call this a twin stitch. Some people call it a double stitch, but that means something completely different to me. This is something to remember next time when you come up to it to work it, because you want to work both of those stitches together. And I'll show you how to do that later. And I'll show you how to do that English style. So I worked up to the point, I turn my work, leave the yarn where it is, where it naturally falls, in the front on this case, purl or slip that stitch back purlwise, and then pull that stitch over so that you create that double stitch. If you were purling back, you would continue to pull your yarn through to the front and then continue to purl. In this case, I'm going to knit back. So we count that first twin stitch as 1 stitch, and then work your intervals. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4 as the interval. Then I'll place my marker so that I know when I come back to that marker it's time to start my next short row. I finished the row, worked another row of the lighter colored yarn so that you can see the differences here. So I'll kind of review as I go through them, but here we go. So this one, if you do it wrong, you'll work both stitches, and it'll be weird to try to work them because they're a little tight and one wants to come with the other. So the way that works is you can see that's the old stitch, or the generation below, and this is the new stitch above. You'll just work those together like a regular knit stitch, or kind of like a knit two together. Same here, German short row, stitch. The next one will be the Japanese short row stitch, which is right here. And to show you, or to see how this looks, I'm not going to pick that stitch up. I'm not going to pick that wrap up. So I'll show you how to do it that way, and then the next one is here. So when you come to the stitch that has the clippy on it, or the marker on it, what you'll do is you'll pull that marker out so that you can grab a hold of the stitch. Sometimes I'll grab a hold of it with this needle and then pull the marker off, put it up on the needle with the stitch that it was wrapping, and then you'll work those two together like a, oops, gotta put my yarn in the back, like a knit two together. There's the next stitch. Had a bit of a mishap and dropped some stitches, but we're all fine now, and I'm nearing up to the wrap and turn short row stitches. So here we go, and I'll show you how to identify those. There's your first wrap, so you can see the stitch. Let me see if I can get something pointy to point with. You can see this stitch, and that stitch is wrapped around that stitch. It goes all the way around, kind of like another stitch, and then this stitch has been pulled through. So that's how to identify that. The way you pick that wrap up is to go into it knitwise. That's from front to back. And what I do is I also go into the wrapped stitch knitwise, and I put them both on that needle, and then I knit them both knitwise normally. And what happens when you do that is it pulls that wrap to the back side of the work, and I'll show you how to do that again a little more smoothly. So here's that next stitch that's wrapped. You can see that green stitch going around that lighter colored stitch there. I'm going to go into the front leg knitwise, just go right through it with your working needle, and then go through the second one. And if you're quick about it, you can actually just pull through both stitches at the same time, and I'll show you how to do that English style, the way that I do it here. I don't wrap around my pointer finger working English, so I'm going to go through that wrap knitwise, through the stitch knitwise, because we're going to work both together, and you can work and pull that yarn through both stitches at the same time. So what that does is it puts that wrap to the back so that you can't see it, and it finishes off closing up the gap as well. So I've worked a few rows. Actually, let's get a piece of dark fabric to put underneath here, a piece of felt, so that we can see it. Once again, wrap and turn, and I worked both of those, and you can see that it closes up the gap. This is the Japanese short row. That one looks a little funky, but then you can see this small gap right here, which won't really translate to the shawl once you get it knit up. And then this is a German short row, and then that's a German short row right there. So, like I said, this is my preferred method. It's a little more streamlined, it's pretty simple to do, it's easily identifiable, and you don't have to worry about picking up stitches, just knitting through 2 stitches at once. So I hope this helps out for the Front Range Shawl and any concerns you might have with short rows concerning that. Okay? Happy knitting! Bye-bye.